Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Malvin. For those who don't know me, I'm a birth worker, a life coach, hypnotist, and a former liberal feminist turned radical truth teller. On this podcast, I expose the forces at play attempting to control our minds and bodies, such as transgender ideology, pornography, prostitution, and so much more. Together, we'll untangle patriarchal lies as you listen to jaw-dropping interviews with women from around the world. Warning, while listening to this podcast, you might find yourself triggered or perhaps notice where you've been biting your tongue on the issues that matter most to you. In my coaching and hypnosis, I help women and men stop getting triggered by every single thing, cultivate resilience, stop unwanted behaviors, and increase self-confidence. You can book your first session at whosebodyisit.com, and you can find that link in the episode show notes. And I just want to say that it's because of your endless support that I'm able to interview amazing women, get their stories out, and produce regular episodes for you. So with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And if you're listening in, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also consider making a financial contribution via the link in my show notes. You can also visit my activist sticker shop. My pro-woman stickers have the power to intercept transhumanist programming. So take a photo of your stickers out in the wild and tag me on Instagram at Whose Body Is It. It takes bravery to say that we know porn is harmful and we're not going to look away. We know that porn is all around us, even if we're not really seeing it explicitly. Why? Because porn is culture and culture is porn. Even if you're not watching porn explicitly, again, the chances are porn is still in your life, in your relationship, in your bedroom, and in your consciousness. So how do you identify it? And then how do you get rid of it? It's time we take a hard look at what's really going on in porn in 2023, the industry at large, and the ways it's crept into our minds and bodies. When I was starting to question porn and start to explore radical feminist analysis of porn, it was really lonely. It was a really lonely experience for me. I wish I had had a class like this that's coming up next week. I wish I had had someone like Samantha Berg in my life to kind of hold my hand and to kind of teach me and talk me through my feelings of discomfort and my confusion and my questions. So it's a real honor to be able to host a class like this to offer clarity for those of you who want to be in solidarity, who still have lingering questions, or simply want to get practiced at talking about why porn is harmful. This class is going to be a 3-hour masterclass on Zoom. It's May 11th, so next Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I've asked Sam Berg specifically because she has 20 years experience working with women exiting the sex industry and also working with women who are struggling with their own porn addiction. She's a real expert and also just really good at answering questions in a really clear, compassionate way. So I am so excited to have her doing this class for all of you. So the thing about the class that I want to mention that's going on today is that today is the first day of early bird pricing. So if you are a newsletter subscriber, you will get an email today with the checkout link to snag your early bird price. If you are not a newsletter subscriber already, you can go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter. That link is also in the episode show notes. You'll get an automated email that says, hey, you got the early bird deal. You qualify for the early bird deal, yada, yada, yada. Monday, the price goes up. So if you want to join our class, if you feel like you would benefit from this class, or you know a friend who would benefit from this class, male or female, they have until Monday to snag that early bird deal. Looking forward to seeing you there. Without further ado, let's get into this week's story. I have the masterclass, the porn masterclass coming up And I wanted to use this time to talk about a little bit about my personal history with porn, exposure to porn, how I navigate dating and relationships with a rad feminalysis of porn. And I thought, who better to have this conversation with than my dear friend Serendipity Day. So Dippity, thanks for being available to, to really to get into all of this. I thought it would be, just really fun to go back and forth in a more like informal, less interviewee style way than I normally go about these episodes.
Oh,
Um,
Isabella, it's so great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
and for those of you who are new to Dippity, Dippity has been on the podcast before. We last time we talked about women's festivals, BDSM. It was a really awesome conversation. I think it's in the top 5 most downloaded episodes on podcast platforms. So I'll link that in the show notes too. That's definitely a great conversation and relevant to a lot of the points that we're going to be talking about today. So, okay, I think we should start with, our early exposures to porn. I think it's becoming more common knowledge now that children are being exposed to porn earlier and earlier. And I think the average age, last stat I heard was like 7 or 9 would be the
Wow.
average age that a child is exposed to porn. And that actually fits in with my story. So my first exposure to porn was accidental. Like I did not seek out these materials. I was not shown these materials by a friend or someone at school or a sibling or a cousin. I was at my babysitter's house, her apartment, and it was during the day. And she had this really, really big screen TV, one of those like old school massive ones that like were on like this like rotator, like it, just like probably weighed like 300 pounds. And I don't remember, and this is the weird part. I actually don't remember if it was like a VHS tape that was like in her house or on TV,
Mhm.
because I do remember, like for New York City people, you'll know that you might remember that Channel 35 was like the porn channel. And like at sleepovers, you'd be like, have the clicker and you'd be like, whoops. And you'd like, wouldn't hold the button, like you wouldn't like click past it fast enough because there was that natural curiosity to be like, what is that? So it was either like a porn channel on like cable, cable TV, New York City TV, or the more eerie part is that maybe it was a VHS tape in her family's home. I don't know. But it was an orgy. So I'm like watching TV, looking for like Blue's Clues or whatever I was watching. And it was an orgy. And I didn't know what an orgy was. I didn't even know what sex was. So from my child mind, I just saw a room full of adults, like maybe 5 to 7 adults, like putting their mouths on each other, on each other's genitalia, like things going into different places I didn't even know could fit and go. And I was totally horrified and I turned it off. I did not tell my babysitter, but I think it was probably that day or a couple days later, I told my mom that there was something I needed to share with her. And I was so scared to even say the words and even describe what I had seen that I took her. I was like, I can only tell you this in the like windowless, most like private space in the apartment. And for us, that was the bathroom. The bathroom didn't have any windows. It was like pretty far away from the door, the apartment door entrance. And I just was like, I remember she was sitting on the edge of the bathtub and I was sitting on the toilet or on the floor. And I was just like, this is what I saw. And my mom gasped. I mean, she was absolutely horrified. And it was then that it was that point that she was kind of forced to tell me what sex was. And I really, really didn't want to know. I remember really, really not wanting to know. And just being like, just confused and continued to be horrified by like what the process was. And I was like, really? That goes there? So I can't necessarily pinpoint exactly the effect that that had on me, other than I think I may have had a fear of sex. I mean, I can't say that I can't like diagnose myself, but I would say that, you know, out of my peer group, I was, the last to have sex, the last to make out with a guy. I also had, a mother who was very, very vigilant about me spending the night at other friends' houses who had older brothers. So I had a really vigilant mom. I had a mom who came from a family where there was violent crime committed against young women specifically. So she had that, that consideration. So that was my first exposure porn. So blah.
Yeah. One of the things that's coming to mind is like the way that your body must have like imprinted that reaction for you to say that you were scared is like, I wonder what happened to, your child pelvis to like retract and like tense up and like how that might have stayed with you throughout the years.
Also related to like fear of, like exposure to men or like
Mhm.
I did have bladder infections as a child because I was holding in my pee all the time because there was a boy at school who would open the door to the girls' bathrooms. And I had a buddy system with my friend Sarah. And if if she was sick or I was sick, we just wouldn't have that. We just wouldn't have that protection
Wow.
available to us. And I remember we both have pretty distinct, like humiliating peeing in our pants stories, like in kindergarten. And I absolutely know that it was related to the fear of, using the bathroom. Like it was like less
Mhm.
humiliating to just like pee in front of the whole grade with your clothes on than to have one boy walk in with your pants down.
Yeah. Well, my first exposure to pornography happened when I was very, very, very young. It's actually like one of my first memories of like being like 4 years old. And I was in the bathroom and I grew up in Southern California, and my parents were entrepreneurs and they owned their own business. And they employed younger, like church going, like people from our church, young men in high school. And there was a magazine that was left in the employee bathroom. And I remember like it's not that I found it. It was like, oh, let's show this little girl these images and see what happens, and see what like, see how she reacts. And so this group of like teenage boys were like, oh, look at this. And I remember seeing what looked like a young girl in pigtails depicted like in, like Disney type setting. And then also completely naked and also like in a sexual position. And I remember like being like, oh, this is what they want from me. Like this is how they want me to act. This is how they want me to look at them. And I think that I don't know, like I said, it's one of my earliest memories. And so I don't know exactly. I know that there was consequences from that because it wasn't like there was porn in the bathroom all the time. But I remember looking for it like after that and being like, is it still here? Is it still here? Like, and knowing that, I mean, not to sound like super harsh or anything, but knowing that that was like my ultimate destiny was that like, in order to have guys, make a big deal about me or make a fuss about me, I had to be in these positions that I saw in the magazine and look at them with like the same look that that like little girl was giving in the magazine. And then a few years later, when I was like 7, probably. The same church that we were going to, there was another porn magazine, but this time in the church, not in my family's business. And I knew exactly what it was, and it made me feel powerful that I knew what it was already. Like I was like, oh, I know what this is. And I took the magazine and I showed it to all of my like friends, and I was like, look at this. And it was like we had like a hiding place like outside of the church, and we'd all like take turns going and looking at it and laughing like little kids. Yeah, and then I think that by the time I was 9 or 10, I just thought that it was like this normal thing, like porn is just everywhere, and like it's on the billboards, and it's on, it's like it's just everywhere.
Yeah, I remember in an interview I did with Jennifer Billick, she said, what used to be porn is now the standard fashion magazine cover.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we've been like desensitized so much.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So in seventh grade, this is going a little bit not first exposure, but in seventh grade, I was like in my class, all of the girls were giving blowjobs at the dumpster behind the school. And so I like got invited by this guy that was like the most popular guy in school to go behind the dumpster with him. And he showed me a picture of a woman deep throating and like, choking on a penis. And he's like, I want you to do this to me. And so it's just like, like I had already been exposed to pornography at that point. And so it was just like, oh, he's just showing me a picture of how to pleasure him. Like, oh, he's literally just showing me what he wants. And I think about that a lot because I was in seventh grade, and it was already a normal thing. It wasn't shocking. It was already like, oh, I know what this is. I know what the use is. I know, like what is expected of me is to mimic this behavior and to mimic these looks and to mimic this body and to mimic these actions.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the subconscious mimicry. Like there's the like explicit like this is the manual for how to do this and here's the photo and this is how you position yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I think what rubbed off on me probably less in a less explicit way was just the performance, how to speak, how to kind of move in sex, how to take on like a pornified, like
Mm-hmm.
watered down version of what is there. So, if you think about what we're seeing, not in an explicit way, the way sex scenes are portrayed in, teen romance, teen like dramas and stuff like that to me is like the porn influence that seeped into I would say my life, my love and relationships, to the point where, yeah, I mean, I can't truly say, I mean, how can I don't know that we can ever know really like what is ours and what is influence because we're constantly influenced by the culture that we're in. But I remember feeling like really like there was a turning point where I thought like, wow, like, isn't that interesting to just notice like, or question why I'm doing the thing that I'm doing or why I'm having
Yeah.
the response that I'm having.
One of the things that's really interesting that I want to point out that you just said is that we all know it's a performance. The boy, like the seventh grader boy, me in seventh grade, as 4 years old, like we all know it's a performance. And so it's like it really breaks my heart that, like as teenagers, we are viewing this like, sacred, sensual, sexual, everything as a performance. And I think that that really takes away the magic of sex. It really takes away the magic of our bodies. Because if we are performing, then we're not living in the moment. We're not being in our bodies as much as we can be. We're not, taking it authentically, or I'm not quite sure the word I'm looking for, but yeah, it's like we're pretending.
Mm-hmm.
If we're pretending, then it's like what, like, if we're pretending about like this very, very, very intimate spiritual practice, then like are we and then it's like, well, then of course we're going to hype up the orgasm, or like, the money shot, right? We're going to pretend in this, we're going to perform this, we're going to, and then it's like, when does it stop?
Mm.
When does this performance stop, especially with our intimate partners, especially like with our boyfriends or like whoever? It's like, if we all know it's a performance and we're all trying to mimic this performance, like when do we stop mimicking it? When do
Mm.
we stop performing?
Mm-hmm.
And like for me in my history, like the answer was never. I always had to, be this perfect girl that was ready for sex at any time. I always had like I was always performing this even in middle school, I was like anytime I was around somebody that could see me as as somebody who could give them sexual gratification, right? Which was everyone. It was teachers, it was men on the street, it was, anyone. Then I had to perform for them, right? In order to show that I was actually valuable for of their attention. Like
Mm,
I deserved their attention, right? I had to perform.
mm. Yeah, I remember getting sexual attention from like adult male construction workers to the point where my girlfriends and I developed what we called like fat ugly face, where we would like purposely try to contort our faces, like trying to create like a
Mm-hmm.
five chin situation because we thought maybe that would deter the attention. So I think, yeah, I think I developed strategies to like holding my pee to not have to,
Mm-hmm.
confront the boy who would walk in on me, trying to contort my face and body to, deter attention. So yeah, I think I maybe went in the opposite direction where,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was the last one to, kiss a guy. I was the last one to have sex. Um, because yeah, it felt dangerous. It felt like that scary. And I think my parents definitely reinforced the more dangerous, like risky elements of engaging in like sex and drugs. And but like I said, my mom was incredibly vigilant
Mm-hmm.
in that way. So like my turning point from like getting less like, like I remember like after I went to art school for college, I remember coming back to New York City and at least two of my closest friends that I had grown up with were in like poly, triad, going to sex parties, introducing me to like Erica Lust, self-proclaimed feminist pornographer. And I remember that being the point where I started to get a bit more curious into like the lib fem analysis of porn. I don't like through college, I don't remember having an opinion on porn. Like I wasn't really dating. I think I dated one guy in college. I dated one guy in college and the porn conversation like never really came up. It was a very like short relationship. But yeah, it wasn't until like post college that I really started to wonder if like I could have an empowered feminist relationship to erotic material. And
Mm-hmm.
I was a member of an all-female co-working space called The Wing, which has since like closed. And ironically, they let men in. They let trans-identified men in, so it wasn't actually all women. Haha. But I remember one of their guest speakers, would have like guest speakers come in, and one of them was Erica Luss. So I actually got to, I don't know if I actually met her, but was in a small room while
Mm-hmm.
she gave a lecture about her pornography. And I remember I think I bought maybe one volume. Like I remember feeling like, oh, well, if, it's for sale and it's like art, well, that like must be better too, because it's not like free on Pornhub. Like this is like an exclusive artful
Mm-hmm.
production. And I didn't get very far into it. I just remember maybe watching it a couple times and just like it having like a visceral, it was just a full body no. I just
Mm-hmm.
and I at that time I didn't have the rad fem analysis. So I just remember still thinking like, am I a prude? Like, am I rigid? Like, what haven't I learned or what don't I understand or what judgments do I have about, my poly triad friends who like also were like, sexual assault went hand in hand with that lifestyle. So I knew that there was something harmful about it, but I didn't have the language for it, and I couldn't really
Mm-hmm.
pinpoint why it made me retreat or recoil.
Yeah. The perfect like lib femme, right? Like she doesn't have any boundaries, right? She is ready for anything at any time. and when we start like making this list of like everything that like the perfect live femme would be, it's really she centers males in her life above everything else, above her own health, above anything. And I think that like we get that way because of grooming. We get that way because we're shown pornography at like 4 to 7 years old. We get that way because construction workers, it's like super socially acceptable for grown men to catcall young developing girls. And like the hit show, oh gosh, I forget what it's called, Euphoria,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's about teenagers and it's meant to be seen by teenagers. And it opens with a rape scene. And like you can look up like that rape scene on Pornhub and it's like, like it's like softcore porn. And so I don't think that I was ever like super, super into the liberal feminism because I leaned more towards anarchism and I didn't grow up in a liberal household. But I know that it's like, I think that all women everywhere know what's expected of them. And so if we grow up in a very more conservative household, we grow up knowing that it is expected that we get married to a man, that we have babies, and that we go from our father's house to our husband's house, right? If we grow up liberal, we know that it's expected that we can, be maybe more independent, and we can choose our own choose our own lovers and see and have men come in and out of our lives or our house or whatever, but it's still very much around men. It's very much revolving our lives around the sexual pleasures of men, and that's what is expected of all little girls, and that's what grooming is. It's like having it's just like slowly, and not even slowly, but like reinforcing this belief time and time and time again that our whole entire lives are for the sexual gratification of men. And when we deviate from that, we get called a prude, we get called, a bitch, we get called a swerf, we get called, anything to discredit us, to say that look at her, she is deviating from what I'm like, from what the man is expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you on the, yeah, like that's the messaging that is coming at us from porn and then media. And yeah, one experience that I want to talk about is that I think really helped with my like dating trajectory, like with men, which was that I had a serious boyfriend after college who like unprompted just told me that he had stopped watching porn, like that he had gone through a journey with, like any other guy growing up watching porn and then realized it was bad for him, bad for the women, and stopped. And I was like, great, but at that point it wasn't something I thought to even be concerned about or ask, or like vet. But yeah, that having that positive experience with, a man who was not trying to be violent with me in sex, like not trying to do anything I wasn't comfortable with, like that was a pretty like safe, like first
Mm-hmm.
serious relationship, sexual, like, ongoing first sexual relationship. Yeah. And then, it was, I've never been in a longer term thing with a guy who did watch porn, but it's on the in between where I was like going on dates or having like shorter flings that I was encountering those guys. And I started to ask the question, I don't know if you taught me to do this. I don't know who taught me to do this, but instead of saying, do you watch porn? I asked, how many times a day do you watch porn? So just like, and I remember this one guy that I went on a few dates with said, when I asked him, he said 3. And I was like, okay, that's what we're dealing with here. Okay, cool, good. Got the temperature in the room. Okay. but yeah, it's only in the like in between relationships, where I was going on dates and bringing it up. And yeah, I mean, I had no hesitations bringing, in the
Mm-hmm.
past 3 years, especially bringing it up right away. It opened a lot of like really interesting conversation and also revealed like a lot. And, it's not to say that I'm not trying to say you shouldn't ever go on a date with a guy who watches porn, but it's something you should be aware of if he does. And why? Because you haven't watched porn. It's pretty fucking disturbing and degrading material, which we're gonna, be going over in depth in the masterclass next week with Samantha Berg. But yeah, when I don't know if you saw, I did the poll on Instagram asking, kind of the prompt was like, I want my partner to stop watching porn, but and one of the responses was, that I had I like that I laid out was, I think it's none of my business. And I really just threw that in as kind of like a last. I didn't really think anyone was going to click that one. And it was the most, it got like 42% of,
Mm-hmm.
women clicked that they didn't think it was their business, which
Yeah.
like made me think like they must just not know what they're watching. Cause I think you would think it
Mm-hmm.
was your business if you knew what they were watching.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see that one on Instagram. And actually, it didn't surprise me that much because it's like, and I say this with kindness in my heart, I promise, but like, I don't think that women want to know,
Mm,
right? One of the things that I believe to be true that I see time and time and time again is that the type of porn that men watch absolutely affects the lives of the women that they're around. So like in gynecologist's office, the most looked up porn is gyno porn, right? In the military, the most looked at porn is military porn. In the doctor's office, the most looked at porn is doctor porn, right? In the dentist's office, the most looked at. And so it's like you're
mm,
getting these men who have like professional jobs that are looking at porn, and this porn is going to be, like porn is inherently degrading to women because I didn't actually understand objectification of women until I had a radical analysis of porn. And so it's like you get these men who are watching porn at work and then interacting with patients, interacting with secretaries, interacting with, the women that they're around. And we think that it's not going to affect the way that they see us, that we think that it's not going to affect the way that they interact with us. Like, of
right.
course it is. I just not just, but a year ago I got out of a long-term relationship, and I was talking to my mom about, like, oh, what my new dream guy is or whatever. And I very casually mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, one of my deal breakers is that there's like no porn, like no porn in my relationship. And she looks at me and she's like, well, there then you're asking for like a story. Like there is no man out there that doesn't watch porn. And she really truly believes that. She really, really truly believes that there is not a single man out there that doesn't watch porn on a daily basis. And so I want to just say that absolutely there are men who don't watch porn on a daily basis. It is definitely something I think that, like, if we went into a university and like just did a show of hands of like how many people watch porn, it's going to be the majority,
Yeah.
right? And so now, like you said, like I am like it's a first date question for me. And I have a few dating profiles, like online dating profiles, and I'll put it on my profile too, like no addicts, no Christians, and no pornography use.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes, yeah, it's funny. Like sometimes I do get men who are like, "Well, what's the problem with it?" And like out of like a general curiosity and not necessarily like wanting to have an in-depth conversation. Um, and so I'm really glad that we're having this conversation and that you're putting this on your podcast, because I think that like a lot of people don't know, including women. Like I know so many women who are mothers that are like, oh yeah, I watch porn because it's easier for me to get off watching porn. And it's the end of the day and my kids have been driving me crazy all day. And so I'll just get my little pocket rocket and watch like a quick episode or like 5 minutes. And then, you're one and done in like under 2 minutes, like every single mom's dream, right?
Mm.
And so I think that it's just gotten to a place where it's so normalized. Andrea Dworkin in the 70s said that if we can't stop this now, then our children are going to believe that it's empowerment. And that's exactly where we are today. We have, young women who are in high school that are thinking like OnlyFans or, prostitution is a viable career path for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up the women who watch porn, which is, I think, more common than we think, or that we want to admit. And something that Sam said to me in preparing for the class for next week, she said something like, it's normal and natural to want to reach for these materials. So let's just start there. Like, it's normal to want to reach for these materials. They are widely available. It's almost impossible to not. But now that we know what they are and their power to destroy lives, our sense of self, a sense of embodiment, our relationships, stealing our time, we have to do something about it. We can do something about it. You can do something about it. So we're not here to judge you for having watched it. We want to acknowledge that there is a really, there's this is sexuality that's been colonized. This is sexuality that has been twisted. And so starting to separate, what is your sexuality versus what is pornography, and what is this industry, and what are these materials that turn you like into a robot, is really important to start to kind of tease that apart. And yeah, I think a lot of women have shame, or women have written to me over the past few years, sharing their porn addiction stories with me. And there's a lot of shame around that. So we are going to be addressing that in the masterclass. And Sam has a lot of experience counseling women through their own porn consumption, their own porn addictions.
This brings up a story. So one of the things that Sam told me that like was such an eye-opener is that legally porn is speech. And so legally the violence against women that we see on TV, on the screen, that's not violence against women's bodies. That is art.
Legally, it's protected as
yeah. Legally,
art.
And so a woman cannot. She cannot sue the rights over a film because it's not hers, right? It's art. Most women don't get any royalties for the money or for the films that they produce, and so like if anything like happens during filming that she didn't consent to prior to filming, she has no rights over like that at all. She has no rights. And so like that when I learned that, I was like, oh, this is what objectification is, right? It is the harm on women's body being viewed as speech. It is the harm of women's body is being viewed as art, right? It is saying that you consented to this prior, and just because we changed the rules doesn't mean that you have a voice, doesn't mean that you have a say, doesn't mean that you're like the way that your body is reacting, right? This prolapse that it's causing, this whatever it's causing, you have no right to say that it's correlated to our artwork, and you have no right to bring this up in court. You have no right to have any accusations against us, the male artists, or female artists, right? Like there's so much women produced porn out there that, and it's like, oh, well, we set up nice contracts and we actually listen. And it's like the prolapse is still there, right? The harm to the pelvis after, so like after all of these things, it's still there. Like just because a woman was watching you do it or directing you do it doesn't mean that the harm isn't happening, right? Doesn't mean that the laws change just because a woman is the one that's giving you the contract. Yeah.
So when did you come out of the like anarchist view on porn and prostitution into the rad femme analysis?
Between 2015 and 2017. So like in 2013 and 2014, like I was like at the peak of like my BDSM career. Like I was throwing sex parties, I was teaching consent workshops, I was teaching MSN workshops. Like I was really, really in it. I was traveling to like all of these different places to teach and to perform and all of these things. And lo and behold, I contracted a bunch of sexually transmitted diseases. It was a wear and tear on my body. I got like my in one of the performances, like my shoulder got really messed up.
Wow.
And so I like knew I needed like a break, essentially, like. And so I did that, and I like went down to South America and like, did a trip, just chilled out. And during my break, I didn't really tell anyone in the scene, any of my friends, that I was like leaving or anything, but I traveled quite a bit, and so it was normal to not hear from me. But I didn't hear from a single person. I just dropped off of the place, like of the face of the earth, and not a single person reached out to me. Not a single person was like, "Hey, haven't seen you around." There were like organizations that I was working for, and like, I got reached out to for like to host a workshop or to do a performance or something like that. But like nobody was reaching out to me to see how I was doing. No one was reaching out to see like, how I was feeling or to check on me. And then I realized how many other women have just dropped out of the scene. And so I started reaching out to them and being like,
Oh,
yeah, like, hey, haven't heard from you for a while. Where have you been? What are you up to? And we all had the same stories. It was like, oh, I got herpes, and so I had to stop performing. Or like, oh, I got, like this, STD or like this, whatever, and had to stop performing. And I was just like, wow. Like, and then you just leave. And like, it's almost like when you're an alcoholic and you stop going to a bar, like no, none of your bar friends are going to check up on you. Like you just stopped going, like whatever. If you go back to the bar, they're all going to be happy to see you there, but like it's not one of those things. And then I realized how close to addiction the that group was acting. Like they all acted like addicts around BDSM. And so like, it was just like a high that you get from these performances, or even like seeing these performances, right? And and so when you don't have it, you go through a withdrawal, or like you get really angry and mean, or like, like anything that like exactly like addict behavior, right? And then that's about the same time that my aunt invited me. My aunt is a radical feminist, lesbian separatist that lives on women's land. And she goes to women's festivals every year. And she's always inviting me to them. And so that was like in 2017 or 16, I don't remember. I decided to go. I was like, I'm taking a break out of all of my fun activities. I'll go to your women's festival. And that's where I first met Sandberg. And I was just like, like what is this life of women? like how, like, wow. And I was absolutely fascinated. And I heard her say, she was like, what if love looked less like violence? And it blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, like all of this, like quote unquote, love and intimacy that I've been participating in has looked a lot like violence. And then the next question that I had to ask myself is like, what's the difference between BDSM and domestic violence?
mm.
Like there, like, and the answer that I know now, it took me a few years to get here, but like the answer I know now is that there isn't one. There's no difference. Like the difference is that when, it's like what's the difference between like women who are in prostitution and women who are trafficked? Like there is no difference. Like just because, and it's this like idea of like she was asking for it,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
Like, so the women who choose prostitution and aren't trafficked, oh, she's asking for it, right? The women who choose BDSM over, being just in like a subjugated to abuse, like, oh, she was asking for it. And it's like, isn't that what we've been told for centuries? Like, oh, like she was asking for it. Like, oh, her short dress is like she's asking for it. And so then once I had that analysis, that's when everything just kind of like fell into place. And because I have just been traveling most of my adult life or most of my life in general, it was pretty easy for me to just like fall out of the scene. I was already pretty much out for taking my healing break. So yeah, I've been out for a few years and I have a handful of people who have either reached out to me or like have stayed in touch. And the ones that have stayed in touch, it's because they're out of it now. They're
Mm.
out of the scene. And it did a lot of harm to my body. It did a lot of harm to my psyche. I think that I'm still dealing with repercussions from it all.
Yeah, it's like the quitting is just the beginning. The quitting is a
Mhm.
really important part, but just the beginning. I've been hearing from wives and girlfriends who have decided to stay with their male partners who are in like recovery programs, and some of them, the guys have come out the other side and have been some of them are still really in it. Some of them have come out the other side, and the women, have told me that yeah, were on the brink of divorce. It was not easy to stay. They chose to stay, and yeah, it's a lot to take on. And I have the sticker that says "Dump your porn addicted boyfriend," and I still stand by that because I think like giving an ultimatum or saying like I can't do this with you like this
Mhm.
can be the start of a recovery, or a way out for that guy and for the relationship to get to a place of health and healing. So I still stand by the dump your porn addicted boyfriend, and I know that for everyone, not that's not the story. That's not how things go. People
Mhm.
don't always break up over porn addiction, and that's fine. But it yeah, the cost, whether it's your own involvement in porn as a woman in the porn scene and BDSM culture, or you're dealing with a porn addicted husband, we have to be able to talk about the physical, psychological impacts that, yeah, like you said, are lasting, and just on the like the most benign level at this point would just be that it's seeped into your consciousness, like
Mhm.
just from the pornified culture. And then there's
Yeah.
still so much to work through and to tease out on
Mhm.
that front.
Yeah. Our mutual friend Adelaide Meadow has, I think I don't know if it's in one of her classes or like a reel or something, but she's like an orgasm, like a really, really, really good, like cervical full body orgasm, does not leave you in a position where your toes are curled and your back is curled and you're like tense and
Mm.
like every muscle is locked. Like that is like a pornified, version of what an orgasm looks like. And one of the things that Sam Berg said that I say all the time now is that it leaves you with like porn gives you a chew orgasms, right? And like
Remember,
I
yeah.
say this with like vibrators too, right? It's like and then you're done. And that's it, like it's 2 minutes or less. And what happens is like that trains our brain. Like orgasms are a like an intense feeling, and it has the ability to change the way we think. It has the ability to change how we act. It has the ability to like really control our lives when we are dealing with like a partner that's getting his brain trained to have these like achoo orgasms. What does that mean for us when we're having sexual intimacy, right? It's not, it's going to, it's, I'm just going to say it, like, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
Like, and so with my long-term relationship, he did not watch porn. And I thought that that was the weirdest thing, because up until that point, I was only having sex while porn was on.
Mm.
Like, porn was on the back in the background, and we would all, like, like, we'd be having sex with each other but watching the porn to get off.
Wow.
And yeah, and so it felt so vanilla to me, and it felt so like out of the ordinary for me to like not have porn on and to like be in this relationship where like but what happened was that it was still good sex, like, and the sex was getting better and better and better as it was getting, it was not violent. Like, he refused to choke me, he refused to like do any of these things that I was used to getting from intimacy. At the time, it felt like so strange to me, and so like, oh, how am I ever going to get off with this guy? And the truth is that it took longer, but it was more pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It took longer, and I went from having a chew orgasms to having like 1 to 3 minute long orgasms that were not pornified, that were not, like this, like every single muscle is clenched and tight and like,
Yeah.
um,
Like the rush, the sense of urgency.
mhm.
Yeah. Just to be eliminated. Yeah. Kiminami calls the clitoral orgasms or like the external, like achoo orgasms, the junk food, the
Yeah.
junk food of orgasm.
Yeah.
But yeah, that you bring up a really good point that, what does the time, the way that men are conditioned to orgasm in such a short time frame, how does that
Mhm.
totally contradict like female physiology and the amount of time it takes for us to orgasm without toys or porn or, just like real sequential, like, you know,
Mhm.
buildup of intimacy without all of the the accessories.
And it's like, it's unfortunately like, I think that we've lost so much language around that and how to speak around this subject as women. I talk to women all the time. I have this one friend, she's a single mom, and she had trouble breastfeeding with both of her children. And she's like talking to me, and for anyone out there who's ever struggled with this, or if you see your reflection in this story, like, I have so much compassion for you and everything. And so she was watching violent pornography, like very extreme violent pornography. And she told me, like, like in a different conversation, not relating it at all, that she was watching this violent pornography where they were slicing this woman's boobs, breasts. And I was like, oh, there's your correlation, right? Like, you're having
Oh,
trouble
wow.
breastfeeding, and you're getting off to and you're orgasming to a woman's breast being mutilated. Like, of course there's going to be a correlation, right? I also want to say that, like, if you are raising children and watching violent pornography, like, the decisions that you are making and the way that you are communicating with your children is going to change, right? Like, if you are a parent and you have these connections in your brain that is allowing you to have these, instant gratification junk food orgasms, like, that is going to trickle into every single part of your life.
Yeah. Oh, that's so heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like trigger, like anchoring oxytocin release to mutilation and violence when you're supposed to release, you need to release oxytocin in order to have like a letdown or in order to produce enough milk. So wow, yeah, just like confusing those pathways is
Mm-hmm.
so detrimental. Wow, that's really, and has like generational, like you're talking about a generational effect here. You've already, okay, so
Mhm.
the breastfeeding relationship is now jeopardized. And, in addition to what you just described, which is the like more relational dynamics that change emotional connection and stuff like that. Wow, that's really heartbreaking. Yeah. Yeah. So the class is coming up. Women are really, and men, it's open to men too. Anyone who registers is going to be getting, a window into, what is really being shown without showing it to you. We're not going to
Mhm.
force you to watch this stuff, but Samantha is really going to be taking step by step, with a really comprehensive analysis on, porn as media, porn as, exploitation. She's going to be talking about the industry. And like you said earlier, we don't necessarily want to see what's going on, but we have to. We really have to. We can't afford to look away, especially as the technology has escalated. Sam's going to be talking about AI and deep fake
Mhm.
pornography. Yeah, and yeah, it's going to be pretty heavy stuff, but really, really important. And ultimately, we want people to step away having clarity, to be able to make a choice and to be able to make a
Mhm.
change, to not feel disempowered or helpless. We want to take men and women out of the avoidant blinder, phase of what's going on and into the clarity and action. So,
Mhm.
so that's really, what we want. And I think also for the women who are coming who already have a radical analysis of porn, you'll definitely, walk away from this class feeling more practiced at
Mhm.
articulating your thoughts. I've been getting that question in the past few days, like, am I gonna feel more confident? Am I gonna be able to have conversations about this stuff more easily? Because I know in my bones, I know in my body, it's harmful, but I don't know how to articulate it. I don't know what the talking points are. I don't know what to say. And I feel, when I'm up against pro porn lib fems, like I fall short. So if that is you, you're also gonna, I think, get a lot
Yeah.
a lot from this
I,
class.
I think that your class is offering like a Q&A time, right? I saw that.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's gonna be a Q&A.
Sam Berg is like that is her genius is answering questions in such a comprehensive way. I know that when I was first exploring this journey of like exiting BDSM and coming into radical feminism, like she was my number one person that I was turning to every step of the way, and she helped me so much in like, and I don't want to say like forming these ideas, but like presenting these things and like having me, like I felt like she would like leave little breadcrumbs, and I
Yeah.
was just like following
Yeah,
the
like a real
trail.
teacher. Yeah, like a real
Hmm.
teacher, like with a lot of compassion and patience and clarity. Yeah, I that
Hmm.
that's something that really stood out to me, which is why I asked her to do this class when I interviewed her about we recorded an episode where we talked about her experience like just as an organizer.
Hmm.
And I was, yeah, struck by exactly what you just pointed to, which is her ability to answer questions, like even to the
Yeah.
point where I just want to like pull my hair out and be like, I don't even know. I don't even think I should have to respond to this question. It's so stupid. And Sam has like a very eloquent,
Hmm.
weighted, calm, you know,
Yeah, so sign up for the masterclass and come with your
yes,
questions because no question is going to be too small or too
no,
stupid. I remember like I'm like I had so many questions. I'm like I feel like I know the answer to them. I just need to know the words of what the answer is.
yes, totally, totally. Oh, well, I'm so glad we got to, record this, before the class. I think maybe we could just end with a couple like tips. We talked about, for the single women listening who want to find a man who does not watch porn, what is something that they can say? You mentioned you write it in your bio. I believe I said something on the first, yeah, like I shared my strategy, which is, how many times a day do you watch porn? But what else would you say? What do you have like a closing tip that you would want to share with women who are like, who believe what your mom believes, which is that there just simply aren't men
They just
who
don't
don't watch
exist.
porn?
I think that my first tip is believing that there are men who exist that don't watch porn, right? Like you have to believe that they're out there. It's one thing to like, have this like idea of like, oh, I'm gonna ask this man how many times he watches porn on the first date. And then you get to the first date and the words just won't come out. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that that comes down to the boundaries that we hold with men, you know, and get really, really clear on your personal boundaries of how you let other people treat you and who it is that you're sharing your intimacy with. Because the more clear that you are with those boundaries and with those values, the more you're going to invite men in that share those same clarity and the same values.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, like finding the words to talk about these things. And, I'm not somebody that's gonna like if I'm out on a date and I'm like, hey, how many times a day do you watch porn? And he's like, oh, I don't watch it daily, but I do watch it, monthly or something like that. Like, I'm not gonna stand up and be like, all right, the date's over, bye, I mean, I might, depends, but
Yeah. What about last week? No, I'm just kidding.
um, but like really like how does that shape the way that he views women, right? Like how does and so like whenever I judge men, I judge men on how often they interrupt women. I judge men on if they're cutting off like my sentence, at the end of my sentence, if I can't even get to the last word of my sentence. And like, how does he interact with strangers? How does he interact with friends? Like how many women friendships does he have? How does he talk about those women when they're not around? How
Mm,
does he talk about his exes? Right? If he does watch porn, how does he talk about the women in porn?
mm,
Right? And so those are kind of things that I look out for in dating.
mm-hmm,
I say
mm-hmm.
I'm dating now, and I've only gone on like a handful of dates in the last year. But anyone out there knows of a man,
Whose
send him
body
over
is
my
it?
way.
The Whose Body Is It dating show.
Oh my gosh, I would. Yes, please.
Oh my God, that'd be so good. Yeah, no, it's totally possible. Yeah, my three boyfriends in the past 10 years. By boyfriend, I mean like more than a fling, more than a couple dates, like actual boyfriends,
Mhm.
all didn't watch porn. Don't be afraid to ask. You're going to find out one way or the other.
Mhm.
And I mean, in my case, I have a public like profile and yeah, I'm going to be found out on what I think about it
Mhm.
anyway, and they're gonna, you know, whether you're saying it or not, too. Like the interesting to consider is like if you say you're okay with dating a guy who watches porn, but you actually believe porn is harmful, like your body is gonna say that. Your body is, going to have a response. The body will keep the score on whatever,
Mhm.
consciousness you're holding around this material. So, save yourself some time and yeah, get the conversation with over in the beginning. And if he's lying, you're going to know when you have sex with him.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, in summary, the men are out there. Ask questions up front. Don't be afraid to get curious and ask really hard questions. You deserve to know if you are opening your body up to this man. You absolutely deserve to know what he has normalized, if he has normalized violence and sex, if he has a violent fetish. You are entitled to know that before you put your body and your heart at risk in that way, in that vulnerable space. So it is your business. It totally is your business. And if you're still convinced that it's not your business, please let us, give us the chance to show you something or challenge yourself by coming to this class. And if you still believe that it's none of your business after the porn master class, I'm not going to refund you, but I will read your email.
The emails will be read.
The emails will be read, but come with questions. If you're a naysayer, like come with questions. We're not afraid of your questions. And the chat is going to be on. That's something different than the previous two master classes. The chat is going to be on this time. So yeah. Anything else?
You can find me on Instagram, Astarte Rose in Confidence. And I specialize in walking with women after sexual trauma and experiencing sexual abuse. And there's nothing too small or too big that I haven't heard. So you can sign up with one-on-one sessions with me. I am creating a little downloadable workbook for sexual trauma recovery. And yeah, I'm here for you.
Thank you, Dippity, and thank you for connecting me. You're the one who connected me with Sam. So this is really coming full circle. So thank you for plugging your stuff. I'm going to link your website in the show notes. I'm also going to link our previous episode. And then, of course, for those who want to join the masterclass, you will find that link in the episode show notes. And Dippity will be joining us there too. I'm so excited.
Yes, absolutely. I
Yay.
will see you in the comment section.
Yeah. I'm so excited. Thank you, Dippity. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear this content. And if you do share it on social media, don't forget to follow and tag me at Whose Body Is It? So until next time.